Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to this very important session talking about climate action from the perspective of the power sector. I have an amazing panel here to share their thoughts on the future of energy and also from the climate change perspective. This is hosted by K Electric and nutshell. So I have with me here Malik Amin Aslam, the Minister and SAPM for Climate Change. We have Tausif Farooqi, Chairman NEPRA, Dr. Shamshad Akhtar, who's the Chairperson for the Pakistan Stock Exchange, as well as Karan Das, and former Governor of State Bank of Pakistan. We have with us Syed Mona Salvi, the Chief Executive Officer of K Electric, Irmina Malik, who's Energy Technology and Policy Consultant, and Dr. Imran Saqib, who is Director Governance Policy with WWF Pakistan. So welcome everyone. We'll just straight away dive into the conversation and ask your thoughts. And before that, I'll just sort of highlight some of, say, in the whole ecosystem of power sector and looking at from the climate change lens. Of course, it is absolutely essentially important for all stakeholders that we are mindful of how we make our decisions, how we sort of structure our the entire ecosystem and the infrastructure. From the consumer perspective, of course, it is essentially important that the availability of energy that is there, it is reliable, affordable, but at the same time sustainable as well. And hence climate change, of course, plays such an important role. We'll be hearing from our amazing speakers on their thoughts. We understand that in the given power sector equation in Pakistan, the share of renewables is still fairly low. But when we look at the global, say, shift of the whole ecosystem, and understanding the climate concerns, but also the development of technology, which includes reduction of prices both for implementing solar and other wind projects, and them becoming competitive to utility scale fossil fuel projects, and also strengthening the grid infrastructure. We'll be sort of touching on some of those areas, and of course the role of finance. And to begin with, I would like to invite the SAPM, Malik Amin Aslam, to share his thoughts and also share with us as to what are some of the key areas where the government is making some progress and has set some very good policies. And of course, Pakistan has upped its indices, its commitments by almost 100% when it comes to renewables. So that is such a positive thing to look at. Has set very good targets and ambitious ones, but all stakeholders surely will be committed to sort of make their mark. So may I ask the Honorable Minister to join us and share his thoughts. All right, I think there is a bit of disconnect, some connectivity issues, as we always sort of, I mean, it's just Murphy's Law happens. So I see that he got disconnected. Yeah. Yeah, we'll just wait for maybe a minute or so. So just to sort of talking about, I'm just talking about that in terms of the costs coming down, the statistics are very, very interesting. That in the last decade, the renewable technology battery costs came down by 97%. And if you look at the going forward decade, the numbers even look very, very interesting. They are there's even a reduction. There's a further reduction of about 60%. And of course, when we look at the other sectors that are contributing to helping in the climate action, the mobility sector is also a very key one. There is an IEA report which says that by 2030, there'll be about 230 million electric vehicles on the road. And of course, they need power as well. And we also need to understand that how the power sort of comes to that sector. Energy efficiency is also a very, very important area. This is something which requires collaboration from all stakeholders. There needs to be a policy framework. We already have one in Pakistan, but of course there's additional work that needs to be undertaken. The private sector needs to play its role. The finance industry, the finance pool also needs to play its role. And of course, looking at the ESG and the sustainability considerations, there is of course there are so many learnings that we can bring in from the globe about also some create some solutions, some homegrown solutions as well. Let me just see if we are connected to the SAPM. Let me also reiterate, and I think this is such a good initiative hosted by K Electric, and this is just the conversation we should be having. I think we're having some problems with the connectivity at their end. So what I would now like to sort of invite, I would like to go to our next esteemed speaker. And Tosif, if I could sort of ask you to sort of come in first and share your thoughts as to with regards to also from the policy perspective, how the power sector is shaping its development plan, including from including the implementation of the transmission and distribution infrastructure, managing different kind of contracts, and in particular the initiatives that NEPRA is working on from the climate change lens. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ayla. What if I tell you I'm not ready? I'll be ready at 3:20 at my allocated slot. No, I'm just kidding. You covered it up fantastically. It is very difficult to say something when you are not supposed to say something. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Ayla and KE and Nashel Group for inviting me today. I'm no expert in climate change. Let me admit it on the onset of my talk. Why I'm here then? Definitely, there's a relationship between climate change and the power sector. And I've been told, given these numbers, that Pakistan's manufacturing footprint is about 3%, whereas our carbon footprint is only 0.7%. So we are far, far below, as far as our contribution towards polluting this world is concerned. Honestly speaking, when I joined here as chairman NEPRA about 2.5 years back, in very few months, I realized that in a way, my job is very mechanical, in a sense that a few routine things like tariff increase, like giving licenses and consumer complaints, they are like more like a run of the mill kind of thing, that is happening. And few things are in our control, but there are many things which are not in our control, like dollar-based contracts. We have to make payments. No control on rupee and dollar parity. No control on international prices of our fuels. So prices are bound to increase if the fuel prices are going to increase, especially when you have the rupee dollar disparity as well. So where is my personal value addition in all this? So I took three initiatives in NEPRA. The first one being power with prosperity. What it means is the very first time I'm asking my licensees who are more than 300 plus in Pakistan, anybody doing generation, transmission, or distribution in Pakistan has to get a license from us. So all these big giants, including KE, is our licensee. The very first time I started asking them that uh, how much you have spent on CSR front in the communities that you are operating in, because the minimum license is generally 25 years or 20-25 years, or in a few cases, like we have just delicensed very first nuclear plant in Pakistan, Canop, and it's lasted for more than 55 years. So similarly, there are many hydro projects which last more than 70 years even. So all I'm asking is a very simple question that it is in our uh, energy policy 2015 power policy. It is sometimes in case of licensee, it is very much mentioned in the licensees, sometimes in tariff, and most of the time all these companies have pledges with the local governments that they are going to make these many investments in the local community. So through this I'm trying to bring a green revolution, because I fully believe in this is my conviction that this green revolution, which eventually helps you overcome your climate change challenges, happens in your mind. You have to purify your thoughts first. You have to make them green. If your thoughts are highly impure, it is impossible for you to be a champion of climate change. So first thing I did was I asked my licensees to have some positive interventions in the communities, like women empowerment, education, medicine, and try to reduce their carbon footprint. Now what we are coming up with is a fantastic idea, like what's happening in the world is there's a carbon credits market. So in Pakistan, we are trying to bring under my power with prosperity mantra or initiative green rating index. What we are saying is basically, if you by nature of your business you are a pollutant and you can't change it, because let's say if you are burning gas or oil or coal, inherently you will pollute the country and this world. So you can offset that carbon footprint by investing in our CSR projects. So we are coming up with a regime of that, and very soon inshallah we will launch that. My team is working on that. They will probably take another month or so. And we first I formed the CSR department very first time in Pakistan, and then we came up with our fantastic evaluation criteria based on almost 15 parameters. And then we evaluated the entire 300 plus licensees. And about a week back or so, we had our very first prize distribution ceremony in NEPRA, whereby we gave the best, the champions of CSR. And you will be extremely happy to know that with this drive, I could be able to generate almost 18,903 jobs in last 1.5 years, and we could be able to attract more than 4.4 billion rupees in this year. So CSR is now converging with the climate change initiatives, with one of the companies, Save the Children. We are planning, and I know the climate change, our ministry is also very much interested in that. We are going to have a joint, first time ever in Pakistan, a show which we are going to probably hold in F9 Park in Islamabad for all the schools and colleges in Islamabad, and maybe Pindi and maybe others as well. So we are going to invite the children, and we are going to offer them some practical ways how to understand the climate change, and their actions. They will let them do lots of activities there in this 2 days event in Islamabad in March. So plus there are many initiatives we have taken, like we have formed one power with prosperity fund with Ahuat, and I'm very thankful to our uh, licensees like KE, like Angro and Kodadu Power Company. They have pooled their resources, and now very first time in Pakistan we are coming up with this RE based projects, whereby we are offering interest free loans through Ahuat, so that people can put rooftop solars and they can generate their own electricity. Because last 74 years, unfortunately, we couldn't provide them with electricity. So if they don't have electricity, I have a reason to believe they don't have clean water, they don't have education, they don't have medicines or medical facilities available. So with this initiative, we are doing that. I would also like to share one contribution that NEPRA made in one of the meetings with Prime Minister, whereby he mentioned that he would like to take Pakistan from current 5% renewable energy to almost 30% in 10 years' time. So I raised my hand and he gave me a chance to speak. And I said, what if I give you a suggestion whereby we can take Pakistan to 30% instantly, today even? And I said, what is that suggestion? I said, entire world is classifying hydro into renewable energy. Why are we not doing it? I have no idea, but this is what we should do immediately. And it's very gracious of him that he immediately ordered to the energy minister at that time. It is still taking a time because they have to come up with a hydro policy whereby they are going to define that. But in the latest national electricity plan, and I've heard Prime Minister Saab in few international conferences like Davos, World Economic Forum, whereby he mentioned that I would like to take Pakistan's current 30% to more than 65% in 10 years' time. So we have already made our contribution, whereby we have classified hydro into renewable energy. This is a huge contribution, I would say, because if you look at Google, let's say Finland, they are claiming they are 100% renewable energy. When you further drill it down, you will find that 98% of that 100% is hydro energy, and 2% or 5% maximum is their conventional wind energy. So these are many changes that we are trying to make in power industry of Pakistan. You would also, all of you know, that we have come up with the very first time a scientific way of expanding the capacity in Pakistan power capacity through IGSAP, Indicative Generation Capacity Expansion Plan, and that is predominantly based on hydro, as well as going forward more than 10,000 megawatts of inclusion of solar and wind. So our focus, NEPRA is the biggest champion of renewable energy. Many other initiatives we are taking. Today morning, Angro guys came to me and they talked to me about this solar park they are developing, 400 megawatts in Jampir area, and that is going to be in line with the CTBCM, competitive trading contracts bilateral market that we are bringing, which means that we are opening up the 16% of our market for the industrialists, for all the manufacturers who can do their own buy and sell of electricity through bilateral market, which is going to be a deregulated market. This is again a huge contribution of NEPRA, and all these initiatives are basically aimed to bring a green revolution in Pakistan, which goes in line with, as I earlier said, I'm not a climate change expert, but all these initiatives that I'm taking is exactly in that line, and that are going to help a lot to achieve sustainability. And as Ayla said in the beginning, that the three words that she used is part of the mandate that is given to me as chairman NEPRA. That is in the preamble of our act, that we have to give affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy in Pakistan. So with this, I close my talk. Thank you very much.
Wasif, thank you so much. Although you do say that you're not a climate sector expert, but certainly you're a sustainability expert. The way you have shaped the entire framework and the overarching framework for taking initiatives in the power sector, your power with prosperity, and also from the perspective of diversity and inclusion. Also looking at creating a host of green jobs, that's so important. Also ensuring that electricity is available at the last mile of the country, creating awareness and capacity building, and while doing this, alongside taking private sector as a partner, extremely important. You also talked about the Green Ready Index. And I think that's an initiative. I think now the stock exchange has also started to sort of look at. And I would like to now move on to our next speaker, Dr. Shamshad Akhtar. Dr. Shamshad, I hope I can request you to join us next. You are very much involved in the climate change discussion. You are leading, of course, the task force for on ESG, the joint task force for of PSX and PICG. And also from your wealth of experience in the banking sector, and also the banking sector being the largest capital provider pool, would like to hear your thoughts, what we can do to make our power sector look more greener, and of course more sustainable for all stakeholders. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much to Nutshell as well as Karachi Electric. I'm grateful to Monis Saab to have included me in this, along with the coordinators of the Nutshell. I really enjoyed listening to the chairperson of NEPRA as usual. It's been very illuminating. So I was tasked to be very specific and talk about financing energy transition. As all of you may know, financing, of course, will be critical for Pakistan's realizing the NDC commitments and how we pursue the decarbonization journey. Pakistan's energy transition alone, as stipulated by our NDC, will require about 101 billion by 2030, plus an additional 65 billion by 2040. So it's aligned with how we will phase out and reach the net zero emissions. Sustainability demands deploying renewable energy, in my view, as a key lever for achieving net zero carbon emissions. Pakistan's opportunity to chart a new, affordable, accessible, lower emissions pathway looks promising, given its renewable energy corridors potential in the areas of Jimbir, Sindh and Shagai in Balochistan. The falling cost of clean energy technologies can not only raise the renewable energy mix to 30% target that we have in our renewable energy policy, but it can also reduce the cost of power, if not by more, in the range of 1 to 2%. But I do believe it will be much more. Chairman Saab had already pointed out to the plans of Angro, which is quite impressive, but there are other plans in the offing too, to develop the renewable energy. Financing renewable energy projects, building additional hydropower, and of course transmission lines to enhance grid usability and reliability, because you're mixing and matching things, and phasing out coal, which is critical, requires restoring viability of power sector in an environmental context too, while leveraging finance and cost-effective technologies. With this brief overview, I would like to focus on 4 points that make the case that leveraging net zero emissions requires requisite reforms of financial markets, but investors and finance will only flow in if governance of power sector is strengthened and financing promotes just transition. So let me focus on the latter point. First and foremost, if you want to tap domestic and international public, which is the UNFCCC funding, and private finance of the required scale, it is possible because money is not the issue. It's getting access to it is real issue. So Pakistan effect, needs effective resolution of legacy power sector liabilities and structural challenges. If we think that the investor will just step in because we are floating in front of them a particular project which is decarbonizing, without considering the environment in which they are operating and how it will be settled, it's not going to happen. Our power sector is burdened, as all of you know, with cumulative liabilities in the range of anywhere from 7 to 8% or even more of GDP, owing to, of course, a range of things which is well known amongst the experts: the circular debt, the disco losses, lifeline consumers, tube wells and export industry subsidies, technical losses, and thefts. Power tariffs, as a result, in Pakistan are almost 30% above the regional peers. So, an investor that comes in looks at the structure of the power sector and sees what has been the governance of it. So, it's important that we strengthen that if you want to attract big financing. Second, getting an enabling sector policy and regulatory comfort to investors is critical. Now, sector policy, I mean, it's completely diverse. You look at one sector, you look at another subsector of the power sector, the two are not talking to each other. The petroleum, the power, which one is going to be progressing at what pace and sequencing, what is going to be the integration of it. It's very confusing, even though I am learner of the energy sector, but I am deep into at least the gas sector. Among others, more clarity is needed on our decarbonization strategy, recognizing its centrality in the development of climate resilient energy mix and projects. We need modernization and integration of the national grid to accommodate intermittent sources of power, the development of decentralized markets, and, as was pointed out by the chairperson of NEPRA, the framework for competitive trading bilateral contract markets is undoubtedly an impressive one, allowing the private parties to connect effectively for buying and selling. It needs to be rolled out faster, and roadblocks have to be removed for investments in renewable energy to lower the cost of power. My third point is that decarbonization requires upfront development of net zero emission and sustainable financing market, an area in which I have had a lot of thought process. Globally, IMF and leading providers are now incorporating risks of alternate climate scenarios in the growth and debt sustainability analysis. Now we know our debt has been growing. Of course, the fund in its own assessments have said Pakistan debt will be sustainable provided XYZ happens. So they're underlying a lot of assumptions in our debt sustainability analysis. It looks at the sensitivities of the growth trajectory, but it actually does not factor in the climate scenario in Pakistan. Global model for climate scenario that looks at the impact of growth on climate scenario is being prepared, and it is being improvised all the time. The advantage of us learning about it will help us look at the sensitivity to our growth trajectory of the climate shocks and the disaster shocks, but it will also tell us our debt sustainability analysis, which can range anywhere from 95 to 110% of GDP, is something which worries everybody when they bring in new financing. And for us to even leverage financing for something big like climate, and I've talked about the requirements of the NDC already. What is interesting everywhere, that climate technical disclosure of transactions across the financial institution is now, and reporting guidelines for sustainability are being made mandatory and mainstream, and regulators are defining risk metrics and capital requirements on buffers to price in climate risk. So, deploying these practices, the central banks are fully recognizing the climate risks, generate financial stability risk, and an elaborate prudential regulatory regime assigns risk weight to exposure of green versus the brown loan assets. Capital markets, sustainability financing, too, is being expanded. Pakistan needs to join the league of 106 sustainable stock exchanges, which have listed over 53,000 companies, and they represent a market capitalization of more than 88 trillion. So, if we were to have more depth and breadth in our capital market and convert it into a sustainable stock exchange, we will be able to attract flows from outside. Institutional investments are instrumental source of finance for net zero emission projects as corporate and markets invest in ESG compliant assets. So let me get to my fourth final point, that there is need for promoting in Pakistan innovative financing architecture, the instruments and tools, something that I was asked to speak about, and enhancing, of course, as I have said, the equity and long-term local currency markets to mobilize risk capital to support new technology companies and project development. PSX is positioning itself, but what we need is projects. Banks also need more bankable projects. So I think all the power sector players have to be able to bring bankable projects. Global action on this front offers a lot of learning for all of us. Everybody knows that green bond market standards and guidelines are essential, and they have been able to, countries have been able to on aggregate issue about 1 trillion since 2007. But only 30% of the emerging markets green bonds were issued out of China. Pakistan has taken steps, but these are baby steps. We have issued a 500 million green bond, which was done by the WABDA to fund the hydroelectric project. It opens up opportunity for green transactions financing. But I think, like every other emerging markets that's taking this seriously, Pakistan needs to adopt enabling definition framework and green taxonomy and environment for green bonds. I'd be very happy to work with the government in some of these areas. Carbon credits, another area where we have been working. As you know, Mark Carney, the United Nations Special Envoy on Climate Action and Finance, somebody who I have worked with, indicated that to meet upcoming demand, the voluntary carbon market may need to reach up to 330 times its current size to 100 billion annual market value by 2030. These are genuine numbers. So institutionalizing voluntary carbon market in Pakistan presents a huge opportunity to mobilize much needed finance for its climate adaptation and mitigation needs. I'd like to mention here that Pakistan Environment Trust Fund, that I have been affiliated now for some time, was just licensed by SECP as non-profit company, has estimated that emission reductions ambition stipulated in Pakistan's NDC could create carbon credits and unlock investments in nature-based climate solutions. And the Ministry of Climate Change has launched this very interesting 10 billion tree tsunami program. And I see that SAPM is there, so I'm sure he will speak more to it. But currently, only 10 projects are registered in the voluntary carbon market for Pakistan, which is lower than the potential and regional carbon credit. Let's look at Bangladesh and Nepal. They have launched over 80 projects, and China and India together over 1,600 registered projects. Now, on ESG, you've already alluded to, you all know perhaps the size of this global market is phenomenal, and everybody is drifting to attract flow of funding. So in our own little humble way, we have set up a task force for ESG financing, and I'm quite optimistic that we will be able to develop a framework for ESG financing. There are a lot of people who are interested in supporting this, and of course, international markets will be looking at Pakistan's capacity to be able to generate net zero emission transactions. Pakistan can position to attract new pools of financing by making available the right data, suitable portfolio aligned with clients' demand, and developing guidelines for reporting for ESG investments. There's a lot of work that's been done in EU and other markets which can be instrumental. My final source of funding, I would be amiss if I didn't talk about it, because coming from multilateral and bilateral development business, now we do know that under the UNFCCC, there have been bigger commitments that were made, although short of what was promised. But the international community allocated 100 billion for the Green Climate Fund. Now, of course, we have fallen short of the international promises, but that's okay. We have not even been able to effectively tap the Green Climate Fund. There are, of course, problems with the Green Climate Fund, and I could talk more about it, but in the interest of concluding, since I'm sure you all are waiting to listen to SAPN, I'd like to say that only 3 projects are currently in the GCF pipeline for Pakistan, with collective worth of 120 million. I mean, if I had my way, this would be more than double or so. Frankly, we could easily attract 500 million. We could prepare projects very quickly to service both the climate mitigation and adaptation things. So MDB support is also coming in some innovative ways. Some of you may know that World Bank's loan of 400 million Pakistan program for affordable clean energy will, of course, offer a big breakthrough. And the Asian Development Bank has officially informed Pakistan that it would purchase coal power energy projects and in return provide clean energy under energy transition mechanism. I think this is a very big breakthrough. And with this, let me conclude by sharing with you that my big ticket message is that world has a lot of capital, but capital only drifts in places where the governance and the sector policy framework, legal regulatory frameworks and strategies are clear, and there is no dearth of capital to particularly private capital because they are waiting to fulfill their own mission of supporting the climate change. So once again, thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to listening to everybody.
Dr. Shad, thank you so much for such a comprehensive setting out solutions for not just one, but for the whole ecosystem. And of course, there's no dearth of capital, but in order to attract capital, we need to ensure that we de-risk. Please ask other members to mute their mics. Thank you. Yeah. We need to ensure that we have the right kind of frameworks, de-risking policies, etc., and we make our projects more bankable, and we make Pakistan as an attractive, low-risk jurisdiction where we can then scale our ambitions towards net zero and ensuring that we become from one of the most climate change affected country to one of the least, and we sort of cover our climate risks. We have our Honorable Minister for Climate Change and SAPM, Malik Amin Aslam. He has joined us. Earlier there was some connectivity problems. Without any further wait, I would like to invite him to share his thoughts and let us know what are the great initiatives that the government has taken, and in the future, how do we see this country managing its climate risk, and of course, developing with the sustainability lens at the forefront. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad to be joining this very interesting discussion. And I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me over here. I've heard what Dr. Saba just talked about in terms of the energy sector and its role for climate action. There is no doubt that energy sector has to be one of the main pillars for positive climate action. And that was exactly what the message was out of the Glasgow Pact. This was, in fact, one of the two main pillars which were highlighted, along with clean energy, and the other one was nature-based solutions. This was very interesting because it resonated with our own particular stand that we had taken in our NDC, which is again was based on these two very pillars, that we need to move towards clean energy, and we also need to base our future development by protecting and by utilizing nature-based solutions. So we were totally aligned with the global thinking on this the issue of climate action, and that is why there was a lot of gravitas to Pakistan's NDC and to Pakistan's climate vision. We, as you know, are a country which is not a big emitter. We are still less than 1% of the global carbon emissions. But what our vision is very clear, that we do going forward. We do not want to add to the problem of climate change. We want to be a part of the solution to climate change, and that is why these two pillars of nature-based solutions and clean energy transition become extremely important. We have been moving on both these pillars, so we're not just talking, but we're actually walking the talk on both fronts. On the nature-based solution side, we have been investing in plantation of trees. We had the billion tree project, which was completed in KP province, and now we are going ahead with the 10 billion tree project all over Pakistan. It includes plantations from the natural forest in KP to plantation forest to riverine forest and to the mangroves in the south of Pakistan. We also have been expanding our protected areas in Pakistan as areas of wilderness and also of carbon sequestration. In the last 1 year alone, we have added 50% more national parks than what was there before. So before we had 30 national parks, and now we have 45. This again is a nature-based solution that we are investing in. On the clean energy side, the second pillar, we have set out very ambitious targets. One is on the energy mix, that we hope that by 2030 we would like 60% of our energy mix to be made based on zero carbon clean energy, and that would include wind, solar, hydro, especially hydro, and also nuclear energy. And on the transport's other side, we are also, which is again one of the big greenhouse gas emitters in Pakistan. We are transitioning towards an electric vehicle transition, and we have set out a target of 30% electric vehicles by 2030. So both of our moves are based on quantified targets in 2030. Now this is very important because at COP26 we took a stand of not going for a net zero announcement, and we were very clear that net zero announcements without clear 10-year plans amount to zero, and that is what the situation was, that the net zeros which were announced at Glasgow were elongated till 2050, 2060, and even 2070 by India, and it became a joke of a net zero by the time it got to 2070. And then there was an analysis done, and none of these net zero announcements has any 10-year plans. Pakistan, on the other hand, had a clear 10-year plan. Our NDC was not a book of guesses like most other NDCs, which you can't tell what the country is trying to do, and it is sort of strategic confusion that every country has put every other country into. We were very clear. We were clear that where we wanted to go in 10 years, and what is the pathway, and what are the projects that are going to get there, and what is the amount of money that is required that can get us there. We put forward a figure of $100 billion as the requirement if we want to drop below 50% of business as usual emissions by 2030. And we traced it down to clear projects that could be done. And most of these are in the energy sector. Most of these are in the clean energy sector. So we went with a very clear plan. We still have that plan, and we are forging ahead with whatever funds we can generate. On the side, we have also been looking at some very innovative mechanisms. The Asian Development Bank came up with this energy transition mechanism, which is actually focused on trying to shift countries which are locked into high greenhouse gas emission projects, like Pakistan is. Coal is not a big percentage in Pakistan, but the existing coal that we have, we would also like to unlock out of that coal. And we gave the very clear message, and that's why ADB came forward, and they said that this is the instrument which can try to unlock Pakistan out of that coal pathway without it being a penalty for Pakistan. So this mechanism actually goes up and it retires coal plants which still have 20, 30 years of power purchase agreements left, and makes sure that it does not penalize the country, and it transitions it to a clean pathway, megawatt to megawatt. So we are very excited about this. The ADB has set out $5 million for a consultancy that is going to start this month. Their teams are going to come here and look at our projects and see what can be done to transition Pakistan towards clean energy. Similarly, we have we have been engaged with the World Bank in a very innovative manner. I just had a meeting this morning. We are looking at what they call nature-based budgetary financing. So this is going to be a budgetary financing package that the World Bank is going to give, but it is going to be linked with climate action. It is going to be linked with nature-based performance, and we decided on 10 indicators this morning. So that was very exciting. So this is again something that has happened because Pakistan has a very clear climate vision, because Pakistan is spending its own money on actual climate performance, and because Pakistan's 10-year time frame goals are quantified and extremely clear. On financing, finally, I would like to say that yes, that remains a challenge, but I agree with Dr. Saba that if you have the right projects and if you have the right sort of focus, financing always lines up, and there is financing available. GCF, we've got the $120 billion. We've got another 3 projects in the pipeline now, which could double that very soon. But the GCF process is a slow and cumbersome process. We have been trying to make it more flexible. We've also managed to get another $120 million from the World Bank on what is called a green stimulus program, and we were the only country in the world which actually got green stimulus financing. We heard a lot of talk about building back better and nature-based recovery through the COVID, but there was no country that had a plan. We went with the plan and we got the money. That money is now with us. It's going to be spent on 14 initiatives to invest in nature protection, climate action, and to create green jobs on the ground. So I agree that if the concept and the vision is clear, financing does get available. We are also looking at the voluntary carbon market, which is a growing market now, especially after the Glasgow Pact. We see a renewed sort of focus on this market. We will be also contacting Dr. Saba as she opted to offer us kind services. I think we need to develop the institutional structure to make sure that VCMs can be developed and the credits can be obtained. We already have a summary going to the cabinet for that to authorize our ministry to be doing that work. So I think that's an area where there is potential for Pakistan. We have a lot of projects coming up which are going to generate voluntary emission credits, and if we have the right institutional framework, we can definitely do a lot in that. So with this, I would like to thank the organizers and hope that we can keep on moving forward on this particular aspect. Clean energy, the question was, does it provide a basis for climate action? Certainly it does. It is one of the two main pillars on which climate action is based, and Pakistan is certainly taking that path. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. I think it's very heartening to see that all the steps that are being taken, and you mentioned Pakistan's climate vision. I would say this appears to be Pakistan's climate leadership. And it was not setting a shy target when Pakistan upped its NDC's commitment of having 30% renewable to 60% by 2030. We're only looking at 8 more years. So that sort of speaks quite a bit. With regards to the coal projects, I think this is something, a discussion that of course has to start. I've actually personally written an article as well, putting Pakistan's coal to bed. Was very mindful how stakeholders may react to it, but I think there are amicable solutions where when we bring all stakeholders being mindful of the contractual arrangements, we can definitely find solutions. And moving towards green energy is where we can not only address the climate change agenda, but reduce the cost as well. Pakistan has a very interesting framework where we have 3 cents kilowatt to about 16 cents, and of course the impact is then goes out to everyone, and to everyone, all the people who are consumers of electricity. Rightly so that net zero commitments, there's no one fit shoe for all. These are not commitments that are carved in the stones, but as we evolve, we sort of address all our important areas. And very good to see that all important sort of ecosystems that need to be developed, including the carbon credits market, the voluntary carbon markets that are being worked on. Indeed, it gives a lot of hope and a very strong positive message that Pakistan is ready and working in the right direction, and taking the role of a climate leader and a climate champion. So thank you so much for your participation, and I'll now move on to our next panelist, whose company is also hosting us, K Electric. Monas, I would like to move to you and ask you to share your thoughts. What are the interventions that Karachi Electric? What are the interventions that Karachi Electric is making? And I think this is so important to sort of learn, because often we hear about lots of problems, lots of challenges, but today we would like to know that in the climate space, what are the interventions being made, and right from the generation to distribution, since KE is in a very unique role to be doing both. Over to you.
Would like to thank the Honorable Minister, Chairman NEPRA, and of course Dr. Saba and other participants to agreeing to be part of this session. K Electric is a private utility, and we understand the importance of this subject. And it's important that we should do these things so that the awareness is created, and obviously what we can do we'll also explain.
I think we have a bit of problem.
Hello?
Internet is not good.
Honestly, it's
Can
sort
you
of.
hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Yes, we sort of
Online तो आप free हैं.
couldn't hear you earlier. So
ना
yes.
तुम लोग को पे क्या
You're on mute now, I reckon. So yeah.
can you hear me now?
Gee, yes, now it's audible. Thank you.
Okay, so what did you hear last time? Sorry.
Honestly, it was just a bit of sort of static. So yes, would like you probably if you would like to start from the beginning. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so first of all, I would like to thank all the panelists, including the Honorable Minister, Chairman NEPRA, Dr. Saba, to agree to participate in this. KE itself is a private utility, and we are fully cognizant of our importance of the importance of this climate change. And very happy to host it to create that awareness and obviously enlightening all of you with our plans, how we would like to manage the climate change in our controlled area, licensed area. What we have seen in the last year, that developed countries were unable to manage the climate change. We saw outages. We saw utilities not able to meet the demand because of extended demand, high temperature, cold weather, so on and so forth. So, it is important that we also understand how we should be in a position to manage. The subject is way beyond only solar, wind, or hydel. I think the minister also talked about the tree plantation. Chairman Saab also talked about, the other CSR projects that are there. So, KE also is in this space, not only limited to the extent of adding solar, wind in our area, but also we have done things which are beyond power generation or substitution of fossil fuel. And I would like to raise, the concerns which probably are very relevant for this subject. And we know in Pakistan we have higher tariffs. We know the circular debt is because of the fact that we have a lot of expensive fuel that is provided to the people, and at the end of the day, government cannot subsidize it, so they have to pay a higher cost. And in case we are in a position to replace the fossil fuel with renewables, predominantly solar and obviously hydro also, which will help reduce the tariff, and obviously the reduction in tariff will help the country at large. We, by the way, are also, trying to, in fact, it is far away from us, the hydel part, but we are also trying to have some contracts with some of the projects, which are up north and that can provide hydel electricity to K Electric, which will again help us, improve our footprint. As of now, our own plan is to have almost 1100 megawatts by 2030, which will be almost 24% of our total power generation on renewables. Uh, we would like to be more in terms of the overall renewables power generation in our area, but because KE is not close to the water resources, so it will be difficult for us to reach the level where the government is actually targeting of 60%. And as mentioned by Chairman Saab, the move from 30 to 60 would be because of the hydel being included in renewables. So although we'll try to have more renewables and more hydel in our power supply sources so that that number can increase. We have already, by the way, signed agreement with Government of Sindh, an MOU where the World Bank is also partnering to add at least 350 megawatt. It's going to happen soon. We are already, in the market for 150 megawatts of solar. So, which means that we will very soon we have almost 500, and then in the later part we will add the remaining ones. So we are fully aware of our responsibility in terms of power generation, in terms of reducing the tariff, in terms of reducing the carbon footprint. I agree with the minister that our contribution is very low, but at some point in time we need to be, even better. And this is the first time I've heard that there is a discussion whereby the coal generation, the study is being done where it can be replaced. That it would be fantastic. If that can happen without impacting the overall commitment of the country towards these projects. Apart from the power generation, let me also tell you that KE in our licensed area, we are ahead of everyone in terms of providing the net metering. We all see a lot of solar power generation being done by people on their rooftops. And if you look at NEPRA numbers, K Electric is number one in terms of providing the net metering. So we are encouraging people to put up these solar power generations at their rooftop and supply that power to K Electric. So we are again helping the customer base also to do that. Apart from this, let me also tell you that when you go beyond power generation, I think it is important to save the trees. So we have also gone. We have approached all our customers, and we are requesting them to just don't ask for physical bills, and we can send them bills on email, on WhatsApp, on SMS. From there, they can actually just pay them without actually having a physical printout. So it will also add to the overall impact on the climate change. We are also part of initiatives that NEPRA has taken under Power for Prosperity and Power for Safety and Power for Security, whereby we have partnered with Ahuat, and we have provided them seed money so that they can sell solar energy to solar plants to small people who don't have access to the grid, who have low income, and they can actually do businesses. And we have heard Dr. Saab explained us that the recovery is fantastic. So it is also going to encourage the use of solar panels in not only Karachi. It is available in the entire country. So it is going to improve the overall availability of solar to the people who don't have access to the grid. We have heard Dr. Sahaba explaining about the financing. I think as we hear today, State Bank also has provided concessional financing to people who are putting up solar panels. And I'm sure as we are also doing, when we look at big projects, the funding is available right now, and I think I don't see a limitation in terms of financing, and when and if the need goes to that level, we can do all these green bonds where we can have access to the international financing also, and these large size projects can be funded. We I think what is important for this country is to have the right balance of solar, wind, and other plants, so that at the end of the day, the customers would need continued, sustainable, cheap power. So we have to look at the overall combination of these, so that we are in a position to deliver power to them when they need it. In terms of the climate change, I think it is very important for us as a private utility, and we also look ourselves as role model for the entire country to build this city with enough resilience to cater to climate change, which can impact the operations of the city. Also, we have invested a lot in the distribution infrastructure. Also, we saw urban flooding in Karachi, and unfortunately, that water level was so high that in certain cases it was not possible to continue to supply powers. We have invested a lot of money, enabling those areas to have better network, and that process again is ongoing. And hopefully, inshallah, we'll be in a position to whatever we are saying right now. Hopefully, inshallah, we'll be able to deliver on those projects, and will help the country to cater to these needs and manage climate change, manage any eventuality because of climate change better. Thank you very much.
Monas, thank you so much. It's actually really nice to see the kind of sort of solutions that are here on the table, and the conversation that we are having. This stakeholder approach can really sort of help us address our collective challenges. And this is what really needs to be done, an integrated solution approach. And I fully agree with you that climate change should conversation, when we sort of bring it to the power sector, should not only be confined to power generation, but beyond that as well. What you mentioned, the threats or the adverse impacts, as we saw in with regards to, say, whether it is the excess rainfall, flooding, extreme weather conditions, etc. They also have an impact overall on the provision of power, and of course on the reliability, and of course the livelihoods of people. So it's extremely important. It is, and I certainly do hope that once the CTBCM is implemented, your ambitions can then be achieved in a much better way, regardless of what the actual physical jurisdiction of a project would be, when it comes to meeting your ambition of renewable energy. There's of course a lot of debate on renewable energy and base load. And with that, I'll move on to our next expert, Ermina Malik, and would like to invite her to share her thoughts on the challenges with regards to meeting the base load, transitioning towards green energy, and of course talking about the new technologies that can help us scale renewable energy, and the other interventions that can help us meet our targets in the climate action agenda. So, Ermina, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ayla, and thank you, K Electric, for putting this panel together and for inviting me to participate today. As Ayla mentioned, I've been asked to speak about clean energy tech and how tech innovation can help strengthen Pakistan's climate resilience and mitigate the threats from climate change. Also, before I go any further, apologies, I have to keep my camera off because my network is having issues, and I just want to ensure that the conversation doesn't get interrupted. Dr. Shah Akhtar just mentioned something really interesting. Successful transition to a sustainable energy future has certain prerequisites, and one of them, Dr. Akhtar detailed in her speech. Financing is an integral input to any successful transition to sustainable energy. However, there is one other component that I would like to mention, and that is effective planning. Now, the World Bank in the past 2 or 3 years has undertaken several studies to support the planning for VRE in Pakistan. The bank engages primarily with the ministry, but then also with the line companies and agencies working under the Ministry of Energy, such as NTDC. And the basic idea behind these studies was to analyze Pakistan's readiness, both in terms of the infrastructure on the ground and our planning capacity to make the switch from a conventional power system or a system that is dominated by conventional technologies to then this new system which will rely more on intermittent technologies that come with their own limitations, etc. So there were three basic studies. One was a VRE locational or variable renewable energy locational study to identify which parts of Pakistan have the most potential for solar and wind projects of various sizes. The second study was called the VRE integration study, and this basically analyzed NTDC's system to determine whether the system as it is today is technically capable of absorbing VRE and then to what level. Because as some of the other speakers have mentioned, the government of Pakistan set this target for 20% VRE on the NTDC system by 2020, 2030, and or 2025 rather, and 30% by 2030. And so with that in the background, this study then was going to determine what changes, what the state of the infrastructure was at present and what changes would need to be made to absorb that 20% and 30% VRE into the capacity, the generation capacity of the system as a whole. So I'm very happy to share that the studies basically identified large-scale potential, generation potential in both Balochistan and Sindh, 10 megawatts per province, mostly solar in Balochistan and wind in Sindh. This is happy news for Pakistan because considering the size of the country, these are some of the best potential capacity generation figures for renewable energy that you could find anywhere in the world. There was also lots of very good news coming out of the VRE integration study, and I'm going to highlight some of the findings from those reports because I think they'll be helpful for all the stakeholders present, as well as people listening in. So for instance, the scenario that the study considered, it actually considered many different scenarios, but the overall objective was to integrate approximately 23 gigawatts of variable RE into the system, which would be made up primarily of solar and wind. So hydro was not a part of this. And then test the system's resilience and the costs associated with taking on this quantum of VRE. Now, according to the study or the results of the study, the overall costs of the power system in Pakistan could be reduced by up to $5 billion in the next 10 years if Pakistan installs this additional VRE. In addition, according to bank estimates, the external costs from climate change amount to about between 2 to 6 billion in the coming decade, which could be basically which could be saved if the system takes on additional VRE at the cost of between 0.5 to 1.5 billion. So it would cost up to 1.5 billion to install this 23 gigawatts of additional capacity on the system, but then we would save these external costs related to climate change, which are estimated to be between 2 and 6 billion. Okay, in addition to that, one comment that keeps coming up in any discussion around VRE is the intermittency of this technology and whether VRE can ever become base load. Now, for that to happen, obviously batteries are an essential technology. And so systems, VRE systems that have battery storage associated with them are the only ones that could provide continuous power generation or baseload generation. However, until batteries come, the cost or the levelized cost of electricity delivered by batteries comes to a level that is competitive with alternative options. The second best way to integrate VRE into transmission or distribution systems is to then counter the intermittency with what we call reserve. Now, the good news from the World Bank study is that currently the reserve capacity on the NTDC system is sufficient to ramp up our VRE generation to a significantly high level without requiring any further addition in peaking plants. And this is very significant from Pakistan's perspective, because obviously there is a cost associated with augmenting VRE generation or supporting VRE generation with peaking plants. And so systems which don't have sufficient peaking capacity would then have to match or bring up their peaking capacity to a level where they can accommodate sufficient amounts of VRE. But in Pakistan, luckily, right now we have enough peaking capacity to install more than 20 gigawatts more of wind and solar. So this is quite important. The other thing is that the current transmission infrastructure in the short term, so say in the 2 to 3 year time frame, is sufficient for added VRE. And in fact, adding VRE as opposed to conventional generation would delay transmission infrastructure investments in the short term, so in the 2 to 3 year time frame. Beyond that, if we want to tap into the potential of, say, Balochistan, then we would require additional transmission investments as well. So there are a couple of system-wide changes or improvements that the bank study suggests. And I would like to highlight that these are no regret measures. So this is not something that Pakistan needs to do just to integrate more VRE into the system. These are measures that Pakistan or the energy sector in Pakistan needs to undertake anyway to improve the resiliency of the transmission network and the generation system as it is from what it is right now. So transitioning to an energy mix where we have up to 20% renewable energy by 2020 and 30% by 2030 will require urgent investments in grid changes to operational procedures. So for instance, SCADA systems, which can automate the dispatch and basically improve the capacity of the NPCC to manage and control both conventional and renewable power generation resources. The other thing that can be done and should be done rather is to renegotiate the contractually agreed ramp rates of existing and committed power plants, because the way our ramp rates are, or the level at which our ramp rates are agreed to currently work fine for our existing system. But in the future, if we had additional VRE, then slightly more stringent ramp rates would mean that some of these existing peaking plants would provide very good reserve support to the added VRE on the system. And then, of course, accuracy in central forecasting for wind and solar. And so these three measures are basically all that is needed in the short term to add a significantly large quantum of wind and solar to the grid. And this is very heartening, because it basically means that Pakistan doesn't, the only investment that have to really be made in the short term are in the generation assets. And other than that, the system as a whole has quite a good capacity at the moment to absorb this additional VRE. Thank you so much, Ayla.
Irmina, thank you so much. And I think you've sort of touched upon such an important point that while we sort of develop this plan, and there is already an IGCP plan for generation, so any of the plan need to sort of take into account the amount of energy that the grid is capable of taking on. And of course, then there are solutions with regards to the technology and areas where we do not have enough grid capacity, and the last mile of the country which still has non-availability of power. I think it is extremely important to look at solutions like off-grid, mini grid solution as well. This is a very important conversation, and I'm particularly really enjoying all the great amount of input and thoughts that are coming in. I feel that if I were to do a transformational map of the energy sector in Pakistan, we have all the knowledge available here, from policy to finance to climate action to technical everything. It's extremely important. Yeah. So I will now move on to Imran. You are slightly detached from the power sector, but nevertheless, WWF is such an integral stakeholder in the climate action all over the world, of course, and in particular for Pakistan. So please share with us that what is the work that you're doing with various stakeholders. What is that needs to be done in terms of building these partnerships, and perhaps that some already exist. So without further delay, just over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Thank you, Kay. Thank you, Nutshell. Partnerships. This is, I guess, it's so important that we talk about partnerships, because if you really want to move towards net zero, to meet the targets that were set under the Paris Climate Agreement, they won't be possible without collaboration, without partnerships. Because that would mean we're all working in our own silos, and things tend to really slow down and shut down, even when we're not talking to each other, communicating with each other, and partnering with each other. In terms of what the key essential functions of a partnership are, you talk about technology development, demonstration projects, introducing new technologies, contributing to new policies, providing public infrastructure, facilitating local climate action, access to data, technology, and funding. All of these essentially need partnerships. They revolve around collaboration, they revolve around partnerships to get things going. A second distinguishing feature of partnerships is their potential to achieve a more integrated approach to transformation. You use the word transformation, and I appreciated that, because that's what we're looking to do. That's what the energy sector is now looking to do. We really need to reform and transform the way we've been doing things, because what's happening right now isn't working. Pakistan, as per the German Watch Institute, for the past many years is rated as one of the most affected countries anywhere in the world. It's in the top 10 every year. So perhaps more than anywhere else in the world, we understand the need for a transformation in this regard. But partnerships should not leave anyone worse off. What does that mean? That means that even as we talk about decarbonization and the need, it needs to be realized at the very earliest. We need to ensure that those communities who are relying on fossil fuels for their income, for example, are not left behind. So essentially, we need to move towards a just transition. And partnerships can bring together conflicting stakeholders and help generate ideas whereby we can move beyond some of the hurdles that exist. Now, few countries around the world have any kind of formal framework for enabling effective partnerships. It's essentially a voluntary approach. It's a bottom-up, self-enforcing, ad hoc kind of a thing. But we don't really need to have a formal approach in this regard. It's how things work. It's how people interact with each other. It's just that we need to understand how partnerships work and what are some of the pitfalls in this regard. So what the need of the R is to ensure that there's broad cross-sectoral partnerships with respect to information sharing, agenda setting, finding solutions to sustainability problems. So not only climate action, but if you're in Lahore, we could talk about smog. If you're in Karachi, we can talk about wastewater and waste management that contributed to urban flooding there. You're looking at long-term partnerships whereby we're essentially scaling up the solutions that are being proposed by social entrepreneurs, for example. We're talking about solar technology and building transmission lines and doing it in a way whereby we move beyond the hurdles that exist vis-a-vis coordination, financing. So some key specific problems when it comes to partnerships include compensations for losers or people who think they're going to be left behind if a particular project proceeds. Short-term horizons, inadequate coordination mechanisms, and misaligned initiatives. Important partnership functions may include broadening participation, information sharing, agenda setting, finding solutions, policy development, technology development, technology transfer, capacity building, markets, making markets, sourcing funding, all these things. So research, I've been looking at some of the research as to why partnerships can be successful and in cases they're not. Why is that so? And research shows that success conditions in this regard are demanding and depend on a number of factors. And these include effective leadership, willingness of participants to invest time and resources, process management, the degree of institutionalization, adequate funding, and adaptability to local conditions. All of these things are important when we're trying to move forward. This kind of goes to show how complex of a process this is when we talk about partnerships. Coming to WWF and its initiatives, I'll begin. I'm going to highlight 2 or 3 initiatives. And the first one that I want to highlight is a one in which we partnered with sister organizations, WWF based in Sweden, as well as the Karachi Municipal Corporation and K Electric. And this project has been very successful in meeting an ambitious and multifaceted objective to enhance energy security and climate resilience in Karachi. It particularly focused on in 3 areas, Rehri, Gadap, and Maripur, which suffered due to poverty, lack of opportunities, and access to energy and basic amenities. The collaboration between WWF, KMC, and KE resulted in approximately 2,000 households employing and gaining from innovative alternate and renewable energy solutions. And these on-ground achievements have provided KMC and KE with inspiring blueprints, we hope, on which and through which to scale up some of their ambitions when it comes to a resilient energy system. WWF, even beyond the mitigation and energy areas, is currently working on water. So we're partnering with the Australian government to develop something known as a water-sensitive city approach in Rawalpindi and Islamabad under the Australia-Pakistan Water Security Initiative. This just began. This is a 5-year project. And we're bringing in other stakeholders. So we're bringing in the CDA from Islamabad. We're bringing in the Rawalpindi authorities in that city to ensure that we can work together to address some of the challenges in some of the most vulnerable areas and communities in these two cities. And finally, and we're doing so many projects that I can go on and on, but just to end here and highlight one last project. And Dr. Saba mentioned the Green Climate Fund, and one of the projects that we're working right now, it's a feasibility study for something called Recharge Pakistan. And we hope that this will essentially go ahead and we'll be able to get the funds to implement this. But this project could not be possible without a partnership between the government of Pakistan and WWF and WWF's international network. The Green Climate Fund requires a national designated authority to work with an accredited agency. So accredited agency is WWF. In fact, our partner in the US is the accredited agency through which a project is submitted. But you also need an entity on the ground. And here, Ministry of Climate Change is the nationally designated authority. And both of these entities have to work together and ensure that they're coordinating and ensure that any kind of initiative is in line with the goals of the GCF as well as our own NDCs and climate policies. And this kind of goes to highlight, along with other projects, how our organization is trying to work with others and ensure that these projects are successful in the long run. Things are never easy when you're working with others. Obviously, everyone's going to have their own opinion. We'll have a different point of view, but we get beyond that, and by communicating and ensuring that what we are trying to say is it's comprehensible to our partners, and ensure that is one way of ensuring that we can overcome the conflicts. So I'll just stop here, and if there are any questions, I look forward to those. Thank you so much.
Imran, thank you so much. And like you stressed on partnerships, it's so important to recognize who all the partners are, who all are the stakeholders. And many people say this, and I often say this as well, the planet is such an important stakeholder, and we must include in all our conversations, in all our decision-making process, address the rights of the planets as well, because this is not only for us, but for our future generations to come. By 2050, the estimated global population will be something like 9.6 billion. You also talked about water resources. So as a country, we need to be more efficient in terms of using our resources, including water resource, and then obviously doing the planning from an integrated approach. United Nations estimates that by 2060, the resource extraction will be something like 143 billion tons. This is huge. And when we look at whether it is any kind of resource, the Earth has obviously limited resource available. We should of course stress enough on technology, which also helps us from the perspective of circular economy as well. Moving on, since we do have another about precisely 24 minutes more, I would like to sort of take this opportunity to ask a few questions. One is my panelists' thoughts on the role of data and the role of clean tech in addressing the challenges and solving the problems. So Dr. Shamshad, if I could come to you first. Yeah. Dr. Shamshad, can you hear me? I think there is we cannot hear you. I think there's a bit of connectivity problem at your end. While we sort of wait for that to be resolved, Meena, may I come to you and ask your thoughts on the role of data and clean tech?
Yes, Ayla, sure. I might turn my camera off if I have connectivity issues as well. So do let me know if you can hear me clearly. I'll start with tech. Tech obviously has a pivotal role to play. As I mentioned in my remarks, clean tech is evolving quite rapidly. Even for developing economies, it's now a financially feasible solution. Wind and solar, especially wind, is now competitive with most conventional sources of power generation. So, in that sense, clean tech has now finally assumed the position that it needs to be in for this energy transition to occur. As far as data goes, big data is still frontier technology, especially in the context of developing countries. But there is potential for data applications, especially to counter or manage the intermittency of technologies such as wind and solar, because it might turn out that exchange of electricity on a smaller scale within a community or within a city is actually more cost effective than installing grid scale batteries, for instance. And so there is some exploration of using, for instance, blockchain technology to exchange electric power produced from intermittent sources such as wind and solar, etc. And this is already happening in some European markets. So in the future, there is definitely is potential for leveraging data to not only strengthen and improve the transmission and distribution of electricity, but also to optimize generation and make sure that the right kind of generation is available at the right time in the right place. And then, like I said, also to make the exchange of electricity, a real lifetime exchange of electricity, a viable possibility even on the level of consumers.
Thank you, Romina. Let me check with Dr. Shamshad. Can you hear me? And if you could maybe just say something, then I'll be assured that we can. I think you still have, there is still a bit of connectivity issue. Monas, if you are there, I would like to sort of ask you a similar question with regards to data, how K Electric is using data to sort of make some of its solutions, some of its choices. Now, of course, with using the tools of artificial intelligence and many other, and having the right kind of picture right in front of us can really sort of help us in devising optimum tools. If there are some interesting sort of projects taking place at K Electric, we would certainly be excited to learn. I think honestly, is still having a bit of problem hearing you. Still a problem. I think reliability of course, the whole ecosystem infrastructure is, of course, extremely important. And while we have all figured out this new way of interacting with each other and having these important, very important quality conversations, we can, of course, come across some of these challenges, these barriers, which we would not have in a physical setting. but I think those are the challenges that we need to live with. I'll just, in the meanwhile, I'll just share a statistic that IRENA estimates that $1 spent in the space of renewable energy can generate about $3 to $7 savings in the healthcare and climate change related costs. Again, cannot stress enough that when we are devising solutions, we need to look at from a very integrated approach. We need to use the lens which sort of provides us, say, an overarching bird's eye view of where the problems are, what are our resources, and how we can sort of collaborate and jointly sort of work towards finding solutions. Yeah, I see. Glad to see Dr. Shamshad back on the screen. So, Dr. Shamshad, the data question, I'll just reshape it a bit. So, you had mentioned in your discussion that um, the risk perception of different countries, of course, varies, and of Pakistan, of course, is slightly on the higher side. While we need to address and sort of find ways how to sort of fix those using data and having the right kind of quality data available. How can we de-risk and have the right kind of financial instruments in place?
So I see this question. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we
Okay.
can hear you. Thank you.
So the question has different elements to it. Let's just take first the data analytics. I think for anything we do that involves money, getting data analytics has got to be very right. And I can share with you that one of the biggest struggles right now we are having is on the ESG task force is what to capture, how should be the reporting guidelines, how do you get them harmonized, and of course, how do you present the analysis in terms of the aggregates. And given that there is a lot of sector diversity and industry diversity, getting that handled is also a bit of a challenge. So that's one dimension of data when you are looking at trying to attract financing. On ESG, you have to really have data matrix right and then have the analytics. And as you know, there are lots of rating agencies that are involved in being the providers for it to give comfort to the institutional investors who are bringing in capital flows into that ESG financing. The dimension is the bigger financing at the central banks, or for that matter, with the um, at the stock exchanges, at the central bank. As you know, there's a global endeavor underway to get the disclosure right. And I think getting that data right is crucial, because then you can figure out what to finance and what not to finance, or what risk weights to assign to, say, the green versus the brown assets, as they say, obviously, and then determine the capital buffers decided on the risks associated with it. And the third and the final that I'd like to mention, that of course when you are doing any project, be it a renewable or any other power project, given that country risks, sector risk, macroeconomic risk are so multiple, in developing country context, it's important to have adequate credit enhancement mechanisms. And of course, in that context, the World Bank and some of these other entities have definitely very good supportive services for credit enhancement. But lately, since I'm affiliated with the Karandas, I wanted to mention that Karandas has spun off a company called Infrazamin. I don't know whether you're aware of it. And Infrazamin, which is being, the CEO is Maheen, who you may know. She is, she and I have had several conversations to see if we could obviously have more renewable or climate resilient projects out there for credit enhancement to leverage more innovative transactions there. So this is a domestic credit enhancement facility supported, of course, by an international partner. And we were talking about partnership. It's important to get the right partnerships. I don't know whether that meets your expectation because I was a little confused.
No, it certainly does. And again, another very important organization you mentioned about Infrazamin, the provider of providing this in another layer of de-risking the projects. So it is, of course, very important. Monas, glad to see you back on the screen. We were talking about the use of data in terms of sort of course, the right kind of decision making. I would sort of now move in a slightly different direction. Would like to hear thoughts on work being done on energy efficiency. Energy efficiency from the perspective of how do we bring in more efficient, say, tools, more efficient in terms of the utilization of using less amount of energy, in essentially lowering the costs for the consumer, and that of course includes the use of efficient materials as well. So the projects that KE is implementing, what new interesting tools are being used? So please share that with us.
So I'm sorry about that small hiccup. Unfortunately, we have to do something at some point in time to improve the infrastructure of this internet so that these things also should not happen. So again, K Electric is obviously, we all know it's a vertically integrated utility. We have our own power generation, transmission, and distribution. And this cost element or efficiency improvement has to be across the board. And KE itself has invested, and hopefully, inshallah, we'll be able to bring online a 900 megawatt very efficient 60.4 efficiency power plant very soon. We are testing the first machine now, and the second will be done very soon. So this is, and it will, our claim is that hopefully, inshallah, it is going to be the most efficient plant in the country because of its static utilization. There are plants in the middle of the country who have higher efficiency, but because of their volatility in terms of their operations, the efficiency often comes down. In our case, we foresee static utilization, and it is going to be the cheapest in terms of, obviously, other than the new solar that we are going to add, that would still be cheaper, but that would be the most efficient. Again, as I said, it has to be across the board, and the transmission lines, the distribution system, everything has to be augmented in a better, and someone was talking about integration. So, if you have power and you cannot transmit it, again, it's cost. If you have demand and you don't have power, still there is a problem. So, I think the biggest challenge is to foresee where the demand is coming and what sources are to be used. And we have talked about the solar and where we are going to increase our footprint and how we're going to manage whatever we are going to supply. At the end of the day, the distribution business predominantly is the crux of it. And if we are able to manage distribution better, I think we, as K Electric also, and I think in the rest of the country, the cost is going to be lower because the service delivery will improve. You asked about data. It will require a lot of investment. We have, alhamdulillah, we can say that we have put in a system whereby the entire billing, collection, customer base is on a SAP ISU, which is state of art, can be compared with any part of the world. In terms of the electrons, we have installed MDMS, which is meter data management system. We have installed meters on our PMT. we have almost 31,000 PMTs in our system, the pole-mounted transformers, and we have installed meters on almost 28,000. The remaining ones are the ones which are a bit far-flung, and there are certain limitations in terms of putting meters on them. And these meters, by the way, are two-way communication meters. They send us data every 15 minutes. So consider almost 28,000 PMTs sending us information of that PMT every 15 minutes. And this information is actually helping us in terms of the preventive maintenance, in terms of the losses. If you know the number of the units that are consumed by a PMT or used by a PMT and the number of units built, below that, because it also requires integration of the customer base with that PMT, reading of the meters of the entire customer base at one point in time, and again reconciling it with the PMT, calculation of the technical loss, because if we know the PMT's meter reading, the entire PMT is on a feeder, and then we know that what are the electrons that are supplied to that feeder, we can actually know the technical loss of the system. And it is the biggest challenge, I can tell you, in distribution, to identify the technical loss versus the total loss. So you can know how much is being stolen by people and what you have to do, whether you go and disconnect or talk to them or so on and so forth. So this data is enabling us in terms of introducing system-based new connection. Hopefully, inshallah, we would be moving from this MDMS to a self-healing grid, inshallah, in the next 5 to 7 years, where there will be alternates available. We would be knowing if there is a fault before anyone can tell us. The system itself will provide that information. We are migrating towards a system where we will be able to tell you precisely if there is a problem, how much time will it take, where is the car. The car can be told by the system automatically, and ultimately it will reduce cost. Ultimately, that data will help us take so many other decisions which are needed to improve the utility. And again, we would be happy, and we are actually discussing with the other utilities in the country, to help them improve their system also. This is the way to go. You cannot transform the utility unless you have these things digitized in a system where the AI help us to do things rather than doing fishing expeditions. So we are investing a lot of money on the technology, and this data is going to be used for the further improvements that are needed and expected from K Electric. And this is part of our customer centricity. We want to take KE to a level where the customer is at the heart of us, and this is an attempt to do that. Thank you.
Mona, it's absolutely great to know that KE is working on so many innovative solutions. I'll just sort of expand this question further in a slightly different dimension. That is, all this great work that is being done, and to all the innovators and entrepreneurs listening to this conversation, what are the opportunities that exist where they can sort of improve or sort of come in with different solutions and help companies like KE and also largely other power sector stakeholders in Pakistan, and also, of course, from the perspective of addressing the climate change agenda?
I think the climate change agenda predominantly will be driven from adding renewables, and obviously these are when you have to deal with utility, these will be large size projects. And as we told you that we are working with Government of Sindh, World Bank, and we'll be asking for a competition amongst the investors to give us a competitive tariff so that we can award the projects. And for the startups, probably this side of the business might not be something which they can do. While this is something which seems to be a big ticket size, but in terms of when we have this data and we are improving on this data, we are talking about fintechs coming into KE. We are talking to people who can provide us some engineering solutions to this environment in which we are operating. We are talking to people. We have an innovation lab. We are talking to these entrepreneurs, small, who can come to KE and provide their projects, which can be used to further improve the service delivery to the customers. And again, at the end of the day, we are looking at the international utilities also, where these kind of things have been done. And we have to, obviously, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, we can just follow them. And these solutions will come, whether it is joint metering, joint billing, outsourcing of a certain area maybe. So these are all the things that can be done, and we are engaged with these startups, and definitely you will see something on that front very soon.
Thank you so much, Monas. Good to know that there is enough opportunities available for everyone, and everybody can play a significant role coming from different backgrounds. You mentioned about fintech, other technology solution providers, etc., etc. Yeah, Imran, very briefly, we are almost sort of reached our time, but still would like to hear your final thought very briefly. What is in your opinion, the number one solution which can be easily implemented, to address the climate change agenda, where which can be something deployed fairly quickly and easily, the single biggest thing on your list?
I'm not really sure whether there is a single biggest thing that you can do, because climate change affects our communities, our towns, our cities in a different way. I mean, there is no one solution. There's no one solution that's going to fit all the problems and that we're facing. So very briefly, what we really need to do is and I'll talk about adaptation. We've been talking about mitigation all day long. So today, to end, I'll just conclude by talking about adaptation, and that's what we really need to focus on in Pakistan. So yes, moving towards a renewable way of meeting our energy needs is necessary. Moving towards solar and wind is important. But what are we doing when it comes to ensuring that we adapt to the increasing heat waves in our cities? We adapt to the increased episodes of flooding in our rivers, glacial lake outburst floods that we are faced with, the food insecurity that's going to be impacting us. All of these things need to be addressed, and the only way that we can do this is by going into the communities. So we can't do it while sitting in Islamabad, Karachi, Lahore. We really need to go down to Dera Ghazi Khan. We need to go down to Badin. We need to go down to Chitral and talk to the communities and talk to people on the ground. That should be the first step. And that's going to allow for data integration. That's going to allow for all the other things that we've been talking about. Because if you're working with the communities and you're interacting with the communities, you'll know what the problems are, and the solutions are going to come from them as well. So thank you.
No, thank you so much. I think you very articulately mentioned about creating awareness and taking all stakeholders on board. So very interesting conversation, and I think solving the climate change equation and from taking on the challenges that exist in the power sector, because power sector is something that impacts all stakeholders in so many different ways, from anyone who's part of this whole this chain. We've heard some very interesting solutions, and I think in this short 2 hours time, obviously still not enough for we could spend an entire day discussing this, but I think in a very concise manner we have learned the interventions from the policy level, from the technology level, the support of all stakeholders, what are the financing tools available, the challenges to attract additional finance, the support of multilaterals as well, and of course moving towards achieving Pakistan's climate vision. And everybody's input is very important, creating awareness and ensuring that energy, energy acts as an equalizer and really addresses the development challenges of the country. And when we move forward, it is just so evident from only this conversation as well, that when stakeholders come on board and jointly find solutions, we can definitely sort of come on the same page with our diverse perspective and diverse skill set. And with that, I would like to thank all the audience who are watching this this conversation. K Electric, kudos to your leadership for this for allowing this conversation on the future of energy. Nutshell, the organizers for this panel discussion, and everyone who is behind the scenes. Thank you so much. We've had a bit of challenges with regards to connectivity and everything else, but I think we did fairly well. So thank you, everyone.